Celiac disease is a lot more common than you may think. In fact, many cases often go undiagnosed and untreated. So, what is celiac disease and how can you find out if you might have it? Celiac disease is a hypersensitivity and autoimmune disorder that is caused by the ingestion of gluten. It differs from a gluten intolerance or wheat allergy because it causes damage to the epithelial lining of the small intestines. Out of every 133 people in the United States, celiac disease affects one, including some familiar faces like Drew Brees, Mandy Moore, and Zooey Deschanel. Among those with a parent, child, or sibling with celiac disease, 1 out of 22 people will have it. Therefore, celiac has a genetic component. The main genes that are used to diagnose celiac disease is the ones that code for HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8, which are two specific types of MHC class II proteins on antigen-presenting cells. If you have celiac disease, there is a 97% chance you will have HLA-DQ2 or HLA-DQ8. However, just because you have these genes does not mean you will develop celiac disease. It just makes it more likely. There are also environmental factors, including the way you were fed during the first year of your life. How long you were breastfed might influence the microenvironment of your small intestines. A certain type of virus can even make it more likely to develop celiac disease. Now, in order to understand what gluten does to a person with celiacs, we have to answer the question, what is gluten? You probably know it is in bread. However, gluten is the storage proteins in wheat, barley, and rye. So yes, it is in bread, but it's also in so many other things. Gluten is made up of glutamine and prolamines. With the addition of water, it forms an elastic bond to form gluten. This is how bread rises without falling apart. In wheat, the specific prolamine is gliadine, in barley it's hordeine, and in rye it's secaline. However, all three kinds of prolamine activate an immune response in those with celiac disease. So, when a person with celiac disease ingests gluten, it will travel down their esophagus, into their stomach, and enter the small intestines. This is where gluten does its damage. Your small intestines are the main site of nutrient absorption. In order to maximize the amount of stuff it can take in, your small intestines are made up of a bunch of villi. If you look a little closer, a villi is made up of a singular layer of epithelial cells packed closely and held together by tight junctions. Underneath that is the lamina propria, which is the connective tissue core of the villi and is the space for most of your mucosal immune system. So many immune cells are in this lamina propria surveying and looking for pathogens to fight. When gluten from wheat gets into the lumen, the gliadin interacts with the intestinal cells to produce zonulin, which increases the permeability of the epithelial layer by loosening the tight junctions in between the cells. This allows gliadin to scoot into the lamina propria, where it's exposed to tissue transglutaminase. This modifies the gliadin so that it has a higher affinity for those MHC class II proteins from before, HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8. This modified gliadin will be taken into the antigen-presenting cell via phagocytosis, where it will fuse with a vesicle containing HLA-DQ2 or HLA-DQ8. The gliadin will be loaded onto it and presented to the outside of the cell. A CD4 positive helper T cell will come along and bind to the gliadin presented and cause it to activate, thus starting an immune response. Proliferation of that T cell will occur and cytokine production and secretion will lead to inflammation of your small intestines. One of these cytokines, interferon gamma, will start a T helper 1 response. Also, the cytokine secretion will induce a T follicular helper cell response so that it can activate B cells. While all that activation of the T cell response was happening, the modified gliadin was also binding to B cell receptors and inducing proliferation of B cells. The same thing that activated the T follicular helper cells also activated the B cells. That way, the T follicular helper cells induce isotype switching in the B cells. The B cells then produce IgA and IgG antibodies against gliadin and tissue transglutaminase. This response doesn't protect the celiac disease patient from anything, but it is used to diagnose celiac disease. If sufficient amounts of anti-gliadin or anti-transglutaminase antibodies are found, that is more evidence that you have celiac disease. The gliadin that is not activating these T cells and B cells will be activating intraepithelial lymphocytes, or IELs, that are CD8 positive. This causes them to migrate in between the epithelial cells. Here, they are activated by interleukin 15. Those with celiac disease chronically have an overexpression of IL-15 in the epithelium and in the lamina propria. This has many effects. One is that it causes the expression of the activating signal NKG2D and lowers the expression of the inhibitory signal NKG2A on the CD8 positive IELs. The NKG2D acts as a co-stimulatory signal to lower the activation threshold of these IELs to self-antigens. Therefore, the CD8 positive IELs will attack your body's own epithelial cells, causing apoptosis. This destroys the epithelial lining of the small intestines and is the main consequence of celiac disease. Interleukin 15 also prevents the differentiation of regulatory T cells, which usually regulates to stop immune responses from happening. However, IL-15 stops the regulatory T cells from working properly, so every time gluten is ingested, there will be this whole response. Therefore, there is no chance for tolerance of gluten. Therefore, if a celiac disease patient keeps eating gluten, even in tiny amounts, it will get to the point where the villi are completely destroyed. The decreased surface area means less nutrients will be absorbed. This will lead to a whole lot of problems. Some symptoms include diarrhea, anemia, and weight loss due to malabsorption. Because there is less calcium and vitamin D absorption, it can lead to osteoporosis, which is the weakening of your bones. It's important to diagnose children for celiac disease early because continued ingestion of gluten will cause stunted growth, which is irreversible. The small intestine has the incredible ability to bounce back from this damage relatively fast. Therefore, the most common treatment for celiac disease is a gluten-free diet. Of course, this means no bread containing wheat, barley, or rye, but even some of these have trace amounts of gluten in them, which can still affect a celiac patient's small intestine. If you have these symptoms after ingesting any of these products, consult a doctor about having celiac disease, and thank you for watching.